Good morning. This is the Safe House Project webinar series. We host a webinar every month related to survivor care. We also have our Freedom Requires Action series, which is policy-focused webinars. This one is much more direct service, anti-trafficking industry at large focused. This morning, we're going to be discussing utilizing live-in staff for residential restorative care programs. And I'll get to introducing you to our panelists, Michael and Abby. Michael and Abby Arena have a heart to see the lives of youth restored and their eyes open to the beauty their future holds. They've worked with youth for over 15 years, and more recently, specifically with youth human trafficking survivors and survivors of all ages over the last 7 years. In the summer of 2022, Michael and Abby launched Magnolia Home, which is a long-term residential program in North Carolina for female minors from the ages of 11 to 18. And I'm going to, just so everyone is aware, I will let our panelists kind of talk about what their models look like after I introduce them. Susan Muncy, LCSW. She is a CNN hero and L'Oreal Woman of Worth. She's also the founder of Generate Hope, which is a comprehensive and uniquely designed long-term recovery program for women who've been sex trafficked here in my home state of California. She leads a team of dedicated professionals and volunteers who walk alongside survivors in their healing via housing, education, psychotherapy, adjunct therapies, and community partnership. She's also very, very involved in anti-trafficking related therapy or groups and outreach in San Diego. She has a master's degree in social work, and she is licensed in California as a clinical social worker. Carolyn Potter, she's born and raised in Alabama, but shortly after college moved to the Atlanta area. Her family then relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, after 10 years in Atlanta, where she worked for 12 years in the field of child advocacy with the court system, leading the Greenville County Guardian Ad Litem program. And there she also established a nonprofit for homeless youth and obtained her master's in professional counseling. Then they moved back to Alabama in 2012. And she was the state director of the Alabama CASA network. And during her time with CASA, learned more about the issue of human trafficking, specifically the trafficking of kiddos, and then in 2014 accepted the position of executive director at the Well House. The Well House has services for adults and for minors. We're going to talk about a little bit about both of those today. And the Well House has partnerships with several national organizations addressing the issue of human trafficking. And so I am excited to get to introduce everyone to your organizations and you all and your models. And let's start with you, Carolyn. Could each of you go around and provide a quick overview of your program and specifically how you've been implementing the live-in staffing model, how long you've been operating it, and kind of what that staff schedule looks like for your organization. And Carolyn, again, we'll start with you.
Yes, let me talk first about the adult program. It's been in existence much longer than our minors program. When I first began in 2014, we were using the shift model. And so you had weekday shifts and then weekend shifts. And honestly, I don't remember how many different people we had on shifts, but it quickly became apparent to me that this is not going to be effective. So researched around and looked at other different models and came up with what we've used for the last, I don't know, 7 years at least, where we have what we call home coordinators for each of the 3 adult homes. And so we have 6 total, and one comes in on a Monday morning and takes over from another who's leaving and works and lives there for 7 days. And then the following Monday, the second person who's assigned to that house comes in and the other person leaves. So it's basically a 7-day on, 7-day off, but they are there the entire time. And I have asked them the home coordinators if they would like to look at a different model, and they've all said no. So this has worked well for, these last 7 years. Over to the children's home, just know we're still young. We're still young in this. I think it's been 3 years now. We have, I think, a dual model in place right now. We have shift workers, and we also are looking to hire what we're calling a home manager to live in the home. So for the kiddos, we have to abide by the state licensing requirements. And so we always have, at least 2 people on staff in the home. During the daytime hours, we have many more than that. But then we have had the home manager position filled. It's not currently filled, but the advantage to that is that when one of the shift workers calls in and is not able to come, that you still always have the home manager there. Now, I think the key to making these all work is that we also provide generous time off during the day hours, as well as I think every other weekend for the children's home. But, given programming is happening where the survivors are attending various programs, that gives them time away also. So that's very, very key to it succeeding. So we have 2 different models, basically.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Susan, would you give us an overview of your model?
Sure. So we've been in the process of, and ignore my dog, please. She's just barky this morning. We've been around for 15 years. We just celebrated our 15-year anniversary, and we've always used the live-in model. When we first opened, for 2 years, we were all volunteers. And at that time, we called the live-in staff house moms. And, as a nonprofit, we wore a lot of hats. So I was a house mom along with many other things. So I got to really experience that live-in model, and I absolutely loved it. And it's the same thing that we've heard from most of our live-in staff. So we have actually resident guides, we call them now, because house moms was kind of something that people thought was a little too touchy of a term. And the resident guides move into the home. They don't live out at all. We have at least 2 we have 2 on staff at all times, and we only serve adults. The resident guides work 5 days on, and then they have 2 days off, and it's typically a Friday, Saturday off, or a Sunday, Monday off, just so they have a little bit of, a weekend as well. But the benefit of having a day off during the week to run their errands and things. And we've felt that this really gives more of a kind of a family experience, more of ability to role model and to build relationships between the live-in staff and the residents, consistent familiar faces, and so many other benefits. So this is the way we've always operated.
Amazing. Thank you for that overview. Michael and Abby would love to hear from you now.
Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Loud and clear. Technical issues relieved. Well, first I want to say thank you for having us and allowing us to share about Magnolia Hope and kind of what we've done. So we've been in operation for 2 years. This past June was our 2nd year anniversary, and we solely serve minors. And we've actually had 2 different live-in models. So we started in June of 2022, and Abby and myself were the live-in staff, and we were and we really wanted to create a culture of family in the house. So we had more of a foster parent kind of methodology instead of it kind of being a facility, which is typical with group homes. So we moved out of the home because we had our third baby last May. And because it was very difficult to find a couple to be able to move into that kind of space, to be more of a family, like a mom, dad kind of figure, we do a set 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So 14 days on, 7 days off rotation with 2 staff on at all times. And we have quite a bit of wraparound staff that kind of manages the other daily operations, that gives what we call them house parents, the ability to kind of have the breaks and to focus on self-care and things of that nature. You want to share?
Yeah, so Michael said we do the 2 weeks on, 1 week off, but we have really been in a lot of discussion about the 7 weeks on. I mean, 7 days on, 7 days off, kind of like you guys do, Miss Carolyn, because right now we're doing the 2 weeks, but we are in kind of a constant discussion about maybe scaling that back, because 2 weeks is a lot. There's a lot of benefits to it, but it's a lot. So we're kind of in the middle of, talking through that, what the benefits are, what the pros and the cons are. And so we'll be transparent about that. 2 weeks is a lot. So right now it's working, but we are, constantly reevaluating and trying to figure out what serves the girls the best and really what serves our staff the best and keeps them fresh and ready to respond the way that they need to.
Yes. And our hope was, again, we want to implement, with a minor's home, as Carolyn said, you've got your state license, you've got a lot of red tape, you've got a lot of parameters that a lot of adult programs don't have. And so in many ways, there's a lot of feel of facility, but a majority of our girls are coming from a facility environment, oftentimes off the streets and then into a facility and then to us. And so we really wanted to alleviate that culture. So, but you can't get away from all of it, because you got a big med cart, you've got just different other things that we have to do on a daily basis. So we wanted to create this family atmosphere where it felt more of like a daily foster home kind of feeling and living and operations in the schedule. So anyways, but yeah, that's kind of been what we've been tackling for the past 2 years.
Thank you so much. I'm Michael and Abby. I'm going to start with you, and we're going to go back the other way for this question. What have been, you kind of discussed this a little bit, but what have been some of those big challenges you've faced in implementing and sustaining the live-in staff model, and how have you overcome those?
Well, one of the challenges that we face is finding the right people, one that have the right heart, but then the right temperament. We are a faith-based organization. And so finding a person, because 2 weeks on is a long time, where you're putting, family on hold, you're putting life on hold, you're sacrificing quite a bit. And so what we want to find is the right person that has the right temperament, that has the right passion, but also are mission minded. So in our context, it's more of like missionary third world country, but you're doing it in the States. Because when you kind of have that expectation and mentality, the long hours or not being able to be included in all the daily life, family, friend kind of and things you were doing prior, you're okay with it because you see what you're doing. You've signed up for that kind of missionary lifestyle work environment. And so, but finding that person has been a challenge.
We've really remedied that. At this point, we feel like we have a really good process, though, in our hiring process. And a big part of that is we just ask a lot of questions in our interviews. We really get to know people. And we like to know people anyways. We want to know, why are you passionate about this? What are the hurdles to you coming? What are you worried about? What are you thinking about? And so we've just really learned to ask a lot of questions and really care about our staff, not just meeting the needs of the girls, but hearing who they are and what their heart is. And that has really helped us be able to identify the right people.
Mm-hmm.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. Susan, I'm going to pass that same question to you. Biggest challenges and how you've overcome them.
Well, I have to agree with Michael. Hiring is a challenge. you do have to find that right person or people. And we also, the number one thing has always been a heart for the women. And I think that something I've said many times is you'll burn out in 6 months if you don't have a heart for the women. And I think, that's something that,
Yeah.
guides us in our interviews. And we also do deep interviews. We want to get to know them, why they're interested in the work, and, what their background is that might, really provide a foundation for them coming in to generate hope and what they might bring with them. We have always advertised through a couple of different methods, but we advertise for a resident guide, and then we also advertise for a resident care coordinator. They're both exactly the same ads, but they seem to bring different kinds of people. People look for, under different headings. So that's always interesting, just to kind of see who we get with each of the ads. But we just had an opening, and actually 2 openings, because we needed a half-time, part-time case manager and a part-time resident guide, just because of the makeup. We have 2 homes, the recovery home, 3 homes, but in San Diego, the recovery home and the transition home. So we had a hybrid model that we're just trying out. So 2 days a resident guide, but no overnights. And then 3 days as case manager. So we're seeing how that's going to work. And then we had also the other opening for full-time resident guide. And we probably went through, I don't know, 50 to 75 resumes. Fortunately, we get a lot of resumes, but like I was telling Aaliyah before, we'll get men apply, and you gotta, it's like, we say it's an all-woman environment. No offense, Michael. But, and we'll get people that are just, they just have a background of working at, say, 7-Eleven or things like that. But we look at what their heart is. Anyway, we just filled both of them. And I feel like, we found some good new resident guides. So yes, challenges and looking at creative ways to overcome them.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Carolyn, same question to you. What have been some of those biggest
Yeah.
challenges, and how have you overcome them?
Do you mean in hiring or just overall?
Just in the staffing,
Yeah.
just in this
Okay.
position at all.
Yeah, yeah. So it varies from home to home, from adult to minors. Finding the right people is obviously the biggest challenge, and then retaining them. Like Susan said, we use a variety of different resources to find people. Usually word of mouth works best. And sometimes we even hire back people who've been there and have left, and now, for whatever reason, want to come back. We need to, as much as we possibly can, make sure that the person understands good boundaries. I agree with Michael and Abby about the family atmosphere, even in the adult home. But if they can't have the proper boundaries, then it doesn't work. It absolutely doesn't work. And we've had that happen. We've had that happen in adult and children's home. So that means that mandates good training. And I don't want to say we're entirely weak on that end, but we're certainly improving and hope to improve even more next year. The right amount of time away during those times, except of course for the shift workers, is very, very helpful. I want to say just something about, Michael pointed out that they're faith-based, and we are as well. But a challenge that we've had recently is, and this is in both the adult and the children's home, is to make sure that our direct care staff, home coordinators included, are familiar with the level of trauma that our people are at.
Mhm.
You know, if you look at the Bible, it talks about you can't have meat until you've had the milk, and our people aren't even at milk. So we've had to, I mean, I've had to write some policies around faith. I never thought I would have to do that. And I would encourage everyone, if you are a faith-based organization, to go and listen to the webinar. I think it was you, Alia, and someone else. I took some of my policy from that webinar. It was very, very good. So I never thought that that would be an issue of concern that I would have to struggle with and deal with, but we've certainly had to most recently. But and you know what, it goes back to two things again. Is faith-based. We're called to love God and love people. I can say that I love our people that God sends to us to serve. Sometimes the kiddos are not willing to let you love them yet, but just take them to McDonald's a couple of times and they'll love you.
Starbucks caramel ribbon
Yeah,
crunch.
Starbucks.
Yes,
Yeah.
oh my word.
Extra crunch.
I love it.
Venti or Trent, I'm like, oh girl, Trent. Thank
Yeah, you need a
I have-
budget for Starbucks.
Yeah, you have to
For
have a
sure.
line item for Starbucks. Absolutely. And thank you so much for saying that. And I'm going to be stealing that line specifically about like, we're not even at milk yet. So let's think about that and utilizing that when I talk on that topic, because very,
Yeah.
very thank you. Carolyn, I'm going to start with you again. I think we're just going to keep flopping like this. I think that's working well. So, I mean, you kind of just talked about like an example of a best practice, like a policy that you put into place to support this model. But what are some of the other best practices? Just for our attendees, Susan and Carolyn's programs have both gone through our certification. They're both gold standard, gold programs based on our certification. And so these are programs that we look to see like what are they implementing as we continue to, look at other programs and guide them to get to best practices. So what best practices have you discovered that have helped you sustain this
Yes.
model? And then kind of on the other side, and how are your residents benefiting from this?
So to help sustain the live-in model, do you mean?
Yeah, specifically with the live-in
Um,
model, what are the best practices?
Okay. Well, interestingly, we are in the process of completely updating our programming in our handbooks and all pertaining to that. And I think I may have gotten some of my ideas from you, Susan, when we did the certification. But we are going to this model of really and truly individualizing everything. Right now, I think you're asking for what has worked best. I'm going to tell you something that I think is kind of a hindrance. It's that we have these phases. So people come in, they're at the stabilization center for a couple of weeks, they're getting assessed, and we're making some really good decisions up front. I think that is a fabulous thing that we've done. Because of that, we see people staying longer with us. And so then they go down into the first phase, and the goal is to be there for a while, then move over to the second phase. So we're going to be changing that, not changing the assessment part or the stabilization time, but changing that center part where, you may just be here a few months and you're already ready to go into what normally would be a long range programming activity. Or you may be here for 6 months and you still need some more healing. You haven't decided what you want to do yet with your life. And we do that now to a degree, but I think truly ensuring that we're just being more cognizant and more aware of where everyone is in the program will yield better success on the end. And so just really and truly a best practice would be ensuring that we're meeting the individual needs of everyone there. And that's everything from therapy to what happens in case management to education, and truly moving people along at their pace. For the kids, again, we're bound by what our state mandates. I think one of the best things that we've done lately is we hired an education coordinator, because our kids are they attend the virtual academy through our county Board of Education system. And so the education coordinator is with them during those hours and ensuring that everyone's on level, doing their work and getting the right amount of help when they need it, because it is an amazing source of, self-esteem, if you will, when they're able to move to another grade level. When they came in on third grade and they are at the end of the year and now they're on sixth grade or whatever. So I think that's one of the things that we're doing well with the kids.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Miss
You're
Susan,
welcome.
same question.
Yes. Well, I'm taking notes on everybody because we are always growing and changing and learning.
Yeah.
It's, systems that have a lot in common, but also, different approaches. So it's good to learn from you guys. Best practices. I think one of the things we do is a lot of training, just ongoing training, but we have a 40-hour online training that everybody goes through, staff, volunteers alike. And like I said, it's all online. We do expect them to complete it within their first month. So they're given, a good amount of time to do it, but we don't want it lingering, over the course of a year. We want them to have that knowledge. And then just ongoing training. And that, can be, we have rounds every week, and that's where the entire team, the resident guides and all the program staff meet together, and we review each woman and how she's doing in the program, in the house, in the community, in the school, interpersonally, just on 10 different levels that we kind of grade every week. But what's really neat is that this is also a time for staff to come together and resident guides not to feel like they're out there on their own, because they're in the program, the women are in the program from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. And then they go over to the home, just across the patio, and they're with the resident guides in the afternoon, evenings, and on the weekends. And sometimes, we found that the resident guides could feel like they were on an island. There were several people in the program staff, but then there's these 2 people kind of on their own. So we make sure that there's this constant communication. If something came up during the day, then that's passed on to the resident guides. We have almost like a nurse clearing. So when 3 o'clock hits, the resident guides come over, meet with the day program staff, and pass on, so-and-so had trouble in therapy. She was very overwhelmed. We brought her back to center, but you may find, that she's struggling this afternoon over in the home. But also in those rounds, that's the other time that the resident guides, we have a young lady who has a very difficult background, and she is struggling with some of the structure that our resident guide was setting. And she was, feeling like she had this relationship difficulty with the resident guide. And it's not, it's about what the structure is that we all agree on. It's a team decision. So being able to, in rounds, clarify that. So it's not, oh, this is an Ashley thing, the resident guide. And so that really supports the resident guides as well. So we want to really give support to them in any way that we can, whether it's time off or we have respites who come in, volunteers who can come and give breaks and things too. But I think that constant communication is one of the most important things, that we do.
And I think there's something that, and I'll pass it to you, Michael and Abby, in a second, but I think there's something that you're saying, like without saying, both of you, Carolyn and Susan, is that like the resident guides are not the sole source of support and the source of programming and the source of transportation and therapy. Like you all have, I know your programs, both of your programs, very like a little bit backwards and forwards, having done certification for both of you. There's very robust services surrounding the individuals in your program, and you have these live-in staff and resident guides. And that is an additional source of support to your very robust programming and staffing and therapies. And, like Carolyn's program is like in getting like neurofeedback and, working with University of Alabama and like doing all of these things that the women are getting outside of support from their living staff. So yeah, with that, I'll pass to you, Michael and Abby, to kind of talk about how you've made this work. And the reason I'm really excited for you guys to chat, because this is we're making this work with minors is where I consistently, like Carolyn, we've discussed how difficult that was to make this kind of live-in staff work with minors. And I know a lot of programs who have like started with this model and have not been able to like sustain it. So would love really to hear from you guys. What have you found to be the best practices? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say too, regarding having those robust services and those support staff, I think that's a huge way to prevent burnout too, because your staff does not feel like they're an island. They don't feel like they're the only ones shouldering the burden. They're not the only ones intimately connected with these clients.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that they can go to chat, and there's not just a couple people in the trenches with them. So I think it's just such a beautiful thing. And then your staff, it almost just feels like one big family. And I know everybody can probably relate to that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's just so valuable. So regarding best practices, I think I agree with what everyone has said. I think the trauma training is just so important, understanding, because you really set your staff up for success too, when they understand not just trauma-informed care, but understand a lot of the trauma responses. Because you can feel like a failure on a lot of days when something goes haywire, because it goes haywire a lot. But if you understand, it's not you she's responding to. Sometimes it is. It's not that it's not ever a staff member that has triggered someone, but it's not always you. Sometimes it's, something that you just don't even know is going on. Or, you may respond this way to that, but she responds completely opposite. And you may never know why, but there's a reason. And so just understanding sometimes those failures, they're not your fault. And even if it is your fault, if you said something wrong, failure's not fatal. We all do that. And just training them like it's going to happen. And so instead of feeling defeated in the moment, they're kind of geared up for it and almost like waiting for like, when's the book going to come, and kind of coaching themselves through it because they've already been trained to expect it. But one of the biggest things, and we just made a huge change about a year ago, so about halfway through, and we attribute it a lot of it to Safe House Project, to the conference. So we went to Kathleen's workshop, and we just really made some shifts after that. So we went from, like Carolyn was saying, from a phased program, and we realized that it kept our girls in a very competitive state. So they were either competing or they were disinterested at all in progressing through it. So we really switched to focusing on intrinsic motivators, so things that are very personal to them that drive them forward. And we did that in a couple ways. So their graduation is based off of therapeutic goals, not off of completing different things or different steps, because it's also very easy to check boxes. There's a lot of girls that are very good at that, yet they're not growing or healing. And that's not what we wanted. That's what we were saying. It's not what we wanted. So we really switched the way we fashion their goals. And then I lost my train of thought, sorry. So we focus on their therapeutic goals, but we also focus on intrinsic motivators in the way of their future, meaning we were just realizing that the pull backwards is so strong. They don't feel safe in that structured environment. So that pull backwards to what isn't necessarily safe, but is comfortable and familiar was so strong. And we felt like we were just fighting that all the time. So we really focused on finding things in their future that pull them forward. So we have really shifted to identifying things they're really good at, or that they could really be good at, or that they get super excited about. So like, for example, one of our girls likes to cook, but didn't know how to. Like, she liked to dabble in the kitchen. So we really dug into that. She got her in culinary classes, and it's become a real passion for her. And so things like that, that we can get to kind of pull them forward, that don't go across the board. It's not for every girl. You know, we just identify it individually. And so what we have found with that shift is our staff gets way more connected to them, because in order to find those intrinsic motivators, you have to be very in tune with where that child's heart is at. And that is also something that makes staff want to stay, because they start to really invest in that child's future. And they come in invested, but it's just another level of that. So we've seen those things really, really help.
Yeah, and another thing we do to really let live-in staff feel the support they need is our ideology is that administration kind of wraps around them as the 24/7 in the trenches. We're there to support and help and pour into them, because if you can do that, then they can pour more effectively into our clients. And so we really, again, family model across the board, just not the residents feel family, but the staffing also feel very connected and outside of just a work-based kind of connection. We want to really make sure that they know that they are loved, cared for. Kind of going back to what Carolyn said earlier, we love God, we love people. When people feel absolutely loved and they feel valuable and they feel cared for, that just makes them feel like they're going to take their job. I mean, at that point, can't pay people less, but when you feel passionate and you feel cared for, and that this is a great working environment, even though it has a lot of stressors, you're willing, I'll do this for free kind of deal. So we want to make sure that staff are getting poured into. So yes, we have the trauma care trainings, but then we also have those throughout the week character communications, those little conversations about building up their characters. So they're getting poured in, and as we pour into them, then they're pouring into the girls as well. They feel more fresh, they feel more vital, they feel more just alive. So, and part of that comes from, I was a former fireman, and you take care of the fireman next to you, because if you take care of him or her, then you're going to take better care of those you're going after to care for in that emergency moment. And so we really value and pour into our staffing on a daily basis, because we know that's what's going to set them up to feel more equipped and alive to pour into the girls. So.
Amazing. Thank you. And I feel like there's another thing being said without saying, kind of similar to what was before, but like that the best practices that you're putting into place with your programming are affect your live-in staff. Right. And so it's not necessarily just about like, how do we affect the staffing model and how do we make the staffing model work? But the better your program is, the better it's serving your clients, the more your clients are getting the care that they need through, the best quality programming and wanting to be there because you've invested into this high quality programming, the easier the job is and sustaining that live-in staff is, it sounds like, as well. So. Well, I want to move into some question and answers, because clearly people have been waiting for this webinar and wanting this webinar, because we do not usually get this many questions. And then hopefully I'll have time at the end to kind of allow you guys one more thing to say. But let's start with some of these easy ones that I totally understand why they're asking. How many people in each program? Michael and Abby, let's start with you. How many girls in the house at one time?
We have 6 beds.
Okay, thank you. Susan? It changes a little across programs, but
Yeah, 6 beds per home. We found that to be the magic number.
thank you. And Carolyn, you're muted.
I don't know how that happened. So in the adult program, there's capacity for 40 beds. and that includes transitional living apartments. We're averaging 25 to 26 in the youth program. We have 10 beds. We have found that 8 seems to be the sweet spot. And we almost have a 1-to-1 staff ratio there. But yeah, that's where we are.
Awesome. Let's see, which question are we gonna ask next? We answered that one. But what have you guys found as far as like pay, not necessarily the amount of pay, because we're talking California versus Alabama and everything,
Yeah.
but are they salary? Is it hourly? What have you found to work well there?
Salary.
Salary.
I'm sorry. You didn't.
Perfect. I was gonna point to you anyway. That's perfect.
We started with a stipend model. So that's when we had live-in house moms. And so everything was paid for them, their housing, their food, you know, anything that they needed. And then it was $1,000 stipend a month. Then we found out that was illegal. So the house moms were happy with it. But anyway, so then we went live and learn. Then we went to hourly, and that's what we pay now is hourly, and we pay at least minimum wage, which is
Amazing.
good in California.
Yes, it is.
For us, it technically is salary, but it's been broken out through hourly, kind of like what that pay is based on sleep schedule. It gets a little bit complicated when you're state licensed, how they want you to break the payout, but typically it's going to be salary with benefits.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm gonna
think that's an important point. Sorry to interrupt, but I
Yeah,
think that's an important point. Benefits. You know, I think that's another best practice to you know, taking care of your staff is good benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo that. We talk a lot in this industry about self-care, but if we're not providing health insurance or the access to health insurance and generous pay time off, how do you take care of yourself if you can't get away? So, yeah.
Yep. Thank you. And I'm going to combine some of these questions. So I have a lot of questions around like, what are the qualifications for somebody who's live-in staff, right? But I'm going to kind of combine that with like, what are the qualifications? Have you kind of seen like a trend as far as who seems to work out age-wise? Like what do you tend to notice about the people that you hire for this position? And Susan, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, it's an entry-level position. So in reality, you know, anyone could move into this position, but that's not what it boils down to. You know, as we talked about before, you know, we look for somebody with the heart for the work, somebody who maybe has some experience. We certainly look for the faith that aligns with ours. And, you know, just somebody we look at the culture of our home, and that can change depending on the women that are there. And so just as we interview women to come to the program and look at a nice fit for both sides of the equation, we're also looking for a fit with that person that we're interviewing for, you know, a house mom position or resident guide, sorry. We have noticed that single women who are a little bit older, maybe their kids are out of the house, make a really good fit for us. They've raised kids, and so not that these are their kids, excuse me, but a lot of the model of parenting, can't get rid of that frog, fits for the ways that we interact with the residents. And a lot of them haven't had that loving parent or loving adult relationship. So, that's a really nice fit. On the other hand, sometimes, having somebody that's kind of the age of a big sister also works well. It's a challenge when the person might be younger than the group that we have in the home. It's hard for the residents to respect that person. Not that they can't get there, but it's a challenge to be, overcome.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Abby and Michael, I have a specific question for you guys because this question on elopements, and I'm going to ask you all because we definitely see higher rates of them with our minors than we do with our adults, right? Do you believe that having the live-in staff has impacted that number of elopements that you've had? Or how's that going with your staffing model?
You want to take it to me?
Such a charged
I'll answer
question.
Yes, elopement. If there is like one consistent thing you'll see, at least as we have experienced with minors, is the elopement. Again, from their words that they've said, we've heard, I haven't done this good for this long. I'm not used to quietness, stillness, order, like different things like this and so it's almost like they're a fish out of water. So they want to go back to more of the unpredictable, chaotic kind of environments they came from. And so you're really battling a whole lot. And I think having a mature staff that understands trauma-informed, understands a unique trauma, understands warning signs, kind of has a good emotional intelligence. We probably should add that in there into I don't want to say requirements, but requirements that there's a high EQ that can discern kind of what's going on, because it does make a huge difference. Because if you can start seeing the signs starting to trend in that direction, what we call happy feet, you can kind of get ahead of it and pull a girl aside and start talking and pull her in. Now, along with that is having the ability to connect with the girls, and it's so important for us to build that deep relationship with them as best we can. We're seeing like 3 months is kind of the average for them to kind of settle in. But in that 3 months, you may have, we live on a 750 acres of land with a mile stretch driveway. I have walked that mile stretch driveway so many times with a girl, and sometimes even like double digits within a week, to talk them and convince them to bring them back. And I think I attribute that to being able to connect on some kind of level with them and being able to reach them, at least on a surface level, to kind of shift that desire to run.
Yeah, to answer the question, I think obviously we see a lot of elopement. It's a very common survival skill. You're just going to see it. But I do think that the consistency of staff makes a difference. I think it can go one of two ways, because I think what we've really seen in the beginning with a lot of our girls is that consistency actually can feel kind of uncomfortable because it feels a little too intimate, like you're actually really getting to know me. I would rather you switch shifts with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but your shift change workers really get to know your kids too. So that's obviously still there, but it's just different. They're spending the night there. It feels more like,
They can't let the mask come down. Like,
right. Those walls kind of go away. We do see some discomfort with that initially, but once they get past that and they settle in and realize how healthy that consistency is, I think we see a lot more ability to continue conversations and talk them through something rather than them making a split-second decision. So that was a long answer, but I do think it contributes to fewer elopements.
And I just want to add one thing, and it'll be really short. Part of what we see too in the elopement is they've had so many people let them down, or when they get in that aggressive kind of blow-ups, people kind of just like push away. And so some of the runaway is they're trying to see, are you going to be like everyone else has let me down? And so being consistent to pursue them and to show you care, and that their blow up doesn't change the relationship dynamic at all. That's been a huge key element.
For sure.
Thank you so much. I would love to just take that chunk and just send it out on elopement. Susan, I see you have something you want to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what they're saying. We, of course, we're working with adults, but I think in a way this could work with minors as well. And we used to have people like would sneak out at night and leave. And we started letting people know you don't have to be here. This is your choice. This is your home. We want you to be here. We want to help you grow. But if you don't want to be here, please let us know and we'll help you find another program that might be a better fit for you. We love our program, but maybe we're not the best fit for you, you know? So it kind of takes that struggle away, you know? It's more, it's handing them the choice, however you word it. But I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks.
Carolyn, do you have anything you want to add on the elopement?
Well, that is obviously the number one challenge that we just had 2 run away last week, and our local law enforcement, we're in a very small town. They have a protocol for when one of our kiddos runs away. So they usually get them back very quickly. I'd like to go back to you asked about who would be the best fit, the best home coordinator, house mom, resident guide. I do not think that there's an answer for that. And also think that you don't typically know until they're with you for a minute.
Yeah.
Even if you have them shadow for a while. I'll give you 3 examples actually of the best that we've had. One was a young lady who had been an intern with us, and then she graduated from college and became a home coordinator, and she was fabulous. She was quiet, didn't get involved in the drama, and she was fabulous. Then she left to go get her master's and hasn't been back. Then the second would be an older lady who has raised her family, and they're all single, by the way, and is just, kind of the mom figure almost, but she has good, healthy boundaries with them. And then the third is one of our graduates, actually, who was out for a minute and has now come back, and she looks like she's 22. I think she's 32. And hands down, my favorite, the best. And they just, again, don't get into the drama, and they have good boundaries with obvious care for the survivors. So that's mainly for the adult program. For the kids, I think we're still trying to identify that for the kids. Right now we have a good group, but it's like a constant effort to keep them all the staff as stable as the kids.
Yeah.
But the group we have right now has been there for quite some time, so I think it's working.
And I'm just going to ask one last question, just a quick overview, because I think this one can do that, and then we'll end the webinar. But can you each explain really quickly, because I know it's different, not all of them live like in a house together with a room that's the resident guide's room or the staff room, right? So kind of where does the live-in staff actually live? And Carolyn, we'll start with you.
Okay, for the adults, we have a transitional living apartments on site, and so 2 of them live in one of the apartments. That's just a perk that we were able to provide for them. But the majority of them go home on their 7 days off. They have their own home elsewhere. For the youth, there is a bedroom there, and it's a full home with kitchen and den and bedrooms and everything there. So they mainly, just stay there except for their time off. And I'll add, and I know we're almost done. There's no perfect model, and I think within this industry we to keep unity, we don't need to think that ours is the best way. Because I've jotted down some notes today that I'm going to take back, and here it's been 10 years, and Susan, for you more than that. So we need to have unity rather than division in this, and not think that our way is the best way and the only way.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's the other thing, like you'll see all of these people taking notes, and that's the other thing that makes this work, right? It's constant improvement, constant
Yes.
evaluation. So
Mhm.
Susan, I'll hand it over to you. What's the living situation?
Well, in all three of our homes, they're large homes. It's just what God's blessed us with. And each of the resident guides have their own bedroom and their own bathroom. And, you know, that just gives them kind of their space away from the rest of the household. The residents have their own bedrooms, but they share a couple of bathrooms.
And Michael and Abby, what's the living situation?
Go ahead.
For residents, we have 4 bedrooms that have their own full bathrooms in there. We typically, 3 of the rooms will do 2 girls in each, and then we have a 4th bedroom that's more of like a solo. But again, all of it has whatever they need in that particular room. Staff, we have staff quarters that have 4 large rooms for them that have each of them have their own bathrooms as well. It's kind of like 3 of the rooms are kind of like an apartment that's kind of separated from the resident, like by like a double door, the resident area. And then we've got another solo in a different part of the house, but very large. The house is, I think, almost 5,000 square foot. So it's a pretty large house to house it all.
Yeah, so they've got their own bedroom and bathroom. I think you said that. They also have their own laundry room. That way they can kind of do their laundry separate as well.
Amazing. Well, that's the end of our time. Thank you, panelists, for coming on. And each of you just like jumped in, and Michael and Abby last minute. And I just thank you guys for being willing to come on and share your expertise. This is something we get asked about all the time. Not to say it's the only way of staffing or the only way that works, but it's a model that not many people have made work and that I get questions about always. So very, very grateful for you all to kind of share your expertise there, and attendees for coming and learning. Thank you all again for just your expertise, and attendees for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
guys.